Howdy folks, so welcome to part 2 of our first round of Gameology, where we are taking a look at open world game design. Part 1, we gave a definition of what an open world game really counts as. I define it as any game that does not use a traditional level-to-level formula in favor of the gameplay taking place across a wide map. And I left off with that video asking, when you're designing the open world itself, which is more important, density or size? And the reason I'm going straight into this is because I feel like this is one of the most important aspects of any open world game, and it leads to one of the biggest mistakes that people often make when they are designing a game like this. So first of all, what do I mean by size versus density? Well, let's take a look at a basic open world map. In this case, the Mad Max map from the video game. So let's start with size. So size we're going to define as basically the perimeter. So basically anything along this yellow edge right here. So that's going to represent how big the map actually is. Now, with a lot of video games, size tends to get emphasized a great deal. And I do understand that because making these great big humongous game worlds, it is a good way to, sort of benchmark where technology is at the time. With every generation, there always seems to be this one open world game that touts how much bigger it is than the big open world game of last generation. For example, when Breath of the Wild was building up to its release, one of the things that Nintendo was constantly touting was how much bigger the game world was from the last big open world RPG of the previous generation, which for a lot of people was Skyrim. And yeah, I do get that, because making these humongous game worlds, it can be impressive. I still remember playing Breath of the Wild for the first time and just being at awe when I first stepped out of the cave of healing and gazed out over the open world, in the knowledge that everything I could see before me, I could physically travel to and interact with without any loading screen. That is really cool, but as I reflected on my time playing Breath of the Wild, that was honestly the only part of the game that I can recall playing. Now, it's been a long time since I have played Breath of the Wild to completion. I've only completed it once, and every other time I've tried to pick up and replay Breath of the Wild, I find myself getting bored and putting it down. Now, I have a lot of issues with Breath of the Wild as a whole, and that's not what this video is about. But one of the main things that I've always complained about with Breath of the Wild is that I just don't feel like the world is, quite that interesting. Yeah, there is variety in the different locations. You do have a volcano, you do have a snow area, water world, all that stuff. But when I reflect on other games in the Zelda series, like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, I can remember more precise themes, bosses, events, stuff like that. And I just don't remember much of that from Breath of the Wild. And to me, that's because I feel like the world isn't that dense. There just isn't a whole lot to it. What do I mean by density? Well, if size refers to basically the perimeter, how much space there is from this side to that side, density is just basically everything in between. Now, density, I feel, is far more important in open world game design, because you can make your game as big as you want, but it doesn't matter if it's just a big open wasteland, and I feel that's a mistake a lot of developers make. And really, you don't need to do that. Size really isn't that important when you're talking about open world games, and to illustrate that point, Yakuza. Now, a lot of people might argue that Yakuza doesn't really count, but it does actually fit into our definition of an open world. It doesn't use a level-to-level formula, the gameplay takes place over a map, and yeah, it does fit within our definition. And you know what? The map in Yakuza is considerably smaller than that of Breath of the Wild, Yet I remember far more of Yakuza, all things considered. The world is more detailed, it feels more alive with all the NPCs going around, there's lots of different side tests to do. Like, it's just a very, very, very dense locale. And that's despite the fact that in the time it would take you to, walk across maybe an eighth of the game world in The Legend of Zelda, you can probably walk across the entire map of Yakuza. And I do literally mean walk. I mean, that should really tell you something about, size versus density with open world design. Like, I understand it, the need to make your game world as big as possible. It is a tempting one, but it doesn't matter if, there just isn't much in it. And nothing can kill an open world game for me more than just, getting bored exploring the open world, because at that point, you start to question if it really should have been open world in the first place. But I think the question that this brings us to is whether or not it's capable to achieve that density that you would get in something like Yakuza while still having a pretty decent sized map. And there actually is a way to do that. Tune in next time and I'll tell you how to do that.